Age is just a number. As they walked across campus, David suddenly stopped and turned to Faith. I know this is crazy, but I don't care. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. He pulled out a small box and opened it, revealing a beautiful ring. Faith, will you marry me? Tears of joy streamed down her face, and Faith nodded eagerly. Yes, yes, a million times yes. They hugged and kissed, the ring sparkling on Faith's finger. But as they celebrated, they knew they faced a difficult task. They had to plan a wedding in just 6 months, all while navigating the challenges of their whirlwind romance. And then there was the small matter of telling their families. Faith and David decided to tell their families about the engagement and the board's condition. Faith's parents were shocked. Married already? Her mother asked, incredulous. David's mother was equally dismayed. You're throwing away your future for a reckless romance, she said, tears in her eyes. But David's father surprised them. I trust David's judgment. If he loves Faith, we should support them. Faith's father nodded in agreement. We'll support you both, no matter what. The two families began to discuss wedding plans, still in shock but trying to be supportive. Meanwhile, Faith and David faced another challenge, planning a wedding in just 6 months while dealing with the media frenzy surrounding their story. They decided to keep the wedding small and intimate, with only close friends and family. But just as things started to fall into place, a new obstacle emerged. As the wedding date approached, the media surrounding Faith and David's story reached a fever pitch. Photographers camped outside their homes, and reporters hounded them for interviews. Faith and David tried to stay focused on their wedding plans, but it was hard to ignore the constant attention. One day, a prominent newspaper published a salacious headline, Faith and David's whirlwind romance, a recipe for disaster. The article claimed their relationship was doomed from the start and that they were only getting married to appease the university board. Faith was devastated. How can they say that? She cried to David. Don't they know our love is real? David hugged her tight. We know the truth, Faith. That's all that matters. But the negative press took a toll on their relationship. Doubts began to creep in, and they started to wonder if they were making a mistake. Faith woke up in the middle of the night, her mind racing with doubts. Was she really ready for marriage? Was their love strong enough to withstand the scrutiny and pressure? She looked over at David, who was sleeping peacefully beside her. She felt a pang of uncertainty. What if they were making a mistake? The next day, Faith tried to brush off her doubts, but they lingered. She began to wonder if she was just caught up in the romance of it all. David noticed her distant behavior and confronted her. Hey, what's wrong? You've been acting strange all day. Faith hesitated, unsure of how to express her doubts. I don't know, David. I just feel like we're rushing into this. What if we're not ready? David's expression turned serious. Faith, I know we've had our ups and downs, but I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Are you having second thoughts? Faith took a deep breath, unsure of what to say. Faith took a deep breath and opened up to David. I'm scared, David. I'm scared that we're making a mistake. That we're not ready for marriage. David listened attentively, his expression empathetic. I understand your fears, Faith. But I know that our love is strong enough to overcome any obstacle. We've been through so much already. Faith nodded, feeling a sense of relief that David understood her concerns. David continued, I want you to know that I'm committed to our relationship. I'm willing to work through any challenges we face, together. Faith's heart swelled with love and gratitude. She knew that David was right. Their love was worth fighting for. I'm committed to, David, she said, smiling. Let's do this. Let's get married and start our life together. David's face lit up with joy. Really? Faith nodded, and David swept her into his arms, twirling her around in a romantic embrace. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was the wedding planner, arriving to discuss the final details of their big day. The big day finally arrived, and Faith woke up feeling like a princess. Her heart was racing with excitement as she got ready to walk down the aisle. David, looking dashing in his wedding suit, waited nervously at the altar. He couldn't wait to see his bride. As Faith emerged from the doorway, David's eyes widened in awe. She looked stunning in her lace wedding gown, her hair styled perfectly, and her makeup flawless. The ceremony was beautiful, with personalized vows and a special song performed by a close friend. As they exchanged rings and sealed their love with a kiss, the guests erupted into cheers and applause. Faith and David beamed with happiness, knowing that their love had conquered all. But just as they were about to be pronounced husband and wife, a sudden commotion broke out at the back of the room. The commotion at the back of the room grew louder, and Faith's eyes widened in shock as a figure pushed their way to the front. It was Victoria, David's ex-girlfriend, looking stunning in a red dress with a determined look on her face. "David, don't do this!" Victoria cried, her voice echoing through the room. "You're making a huge mistake." Faith's heart sank, and she felt like she'd been punched in the gut. Why was Victoria here, and what did she want? David's face turned red with anger. "Victoria, what are you doing here? This is our wedding day." Victoria smiled sweetly. "I know, David. And I'm here to stop it." The room fell silent, with all eyes on the drama unfolding before them. Faith's mind raced with questions. What did Victoria have up her mind? Victoria took a deep breath and dropped a bombshell. "David, you're not in love with Faith. You're still in love with me." The room gasped in shock, and Faith felt like her world was crumbling around her. How could Victoria say such a thing? David's face turned bright red with anger. "That's not true, Victoria. I love Faith, and I'm committed to our relationship." But Victoria just smiled. "Really, David? Then why did you text me last night, saying you still had feelings for me?" Faith's heart skipped a beat. What was Victoria talking about? David wouldn't do that, would he? David looked like he'd been caught off guard. I can explain that." But before he could say anything else, Victoria turned to Faith. "You deserve better than a man who still loves me. Don't marry him, Faith. Run while you still can." The room erupted into chaos, with guests whispering and pointing. Faith felt like her whole world was crashing down around her. Faith's eyes locked onto David's, searching for answers. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Did you text her?" David hesitated, and for a moment, Faith thought she saw guilt in his eyes. But then, he shook his head. "No, Faith, I didn't. I don't know what Victoria's talking about." But Faith's trust was shattered. She remembered the way David had been acting strange the night before, the way he had been distant and preoccupied. "Show me your phone," Faith demanded, her heart racing. David hesitated, and for a moment, Faith thought he was going to refuse. But then, he slowly pulled out his phone and handed it to her. Faith's heart sank as she scrolled through the messages. There, in black and white, was the proof she had been dreading. A text from David to Victoria, sent the night before. Faith felt like her world was crumbling around her. She couldn't believe David had lied to her and that he still had feelings for Victoria. "Why?" Faith asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you text her?" David looked defeated, like he knew he'd been caught red-handed. "I don't know, Faith. I was weak, okay. I wasn't thinking." Faith shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You weren't thinking. You weren't thinking about me, about our relationship, about our future together." David reached out to her, but Faith pushed him away. "No, David. I need space." The room around them melted away, leaving only the two of them, standing amidst the wreckage of their relationship. Faith turned and ran, leaving David standing alone, his eyes filled with regret. Faith ran out of the wedding venue, not stopping until she reached her car. She locked herself inside and broke down in tears. How could David do this to her? How could he betray her trust like this? As she sat there, trying to process her emotions, Faith knew what she had to do. She couldn't marry David, not now. She took out her phone and dialed a number. Mom, it's off. The wedding is off. Her mother's voice was shocked. What happened, sweetie? Faith took a deep breath. David still has feelings for his ex. He texted her last night. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Oh, Faith. I'm so sorry. Faith wiped away her tears. Me too, Mom. Me too. Just then, there was a knock on the window. It was David, looking devastated. Faith rolled down the window, her eyes meeting David's. What do you want? She asked, her voice cold. David looked like he'd been crying. Faith, please forgive me. I was weak, and I made a mistake. But I love you, not Victoria. Faith shook her head. You had your chance to tell me the truth, David. You had your chance to be honest with me. But you lied to me, and now it's too late. David's face crumpled. Please, Faith. Don't say that. I'd do anything to make it right. Faith took a deep breath. I want you to leave me alone, David. I want you to give me space. And I want you to know that I deserve better than someone who lies to me. David nodded, tears streaming down his face. I understand. I leave you alone. But please, Faith, don't give up on us completely. I'd do anything to win you back. Faith looked away, unable to bear the sight of David's tears. Just leave, David. And with that, David turned and walked away, leaving Faith alone in her car, her heart shattered into a million pieces. Faith sat in her car for a long time, trying to process her emotions. She was heartbroken, but she knew she had made the right decision. Finally, she started the engine and drove away from the wedding venue, leaving David and their failed relationship behind. As she drove, Faith felt a sense of liberation wash over her. She was free from the toxic relationship, free to start anew. She thought about all the things she wanted to do, all the places she wanted to see. She thought about the kind of man she wanted to meet, the kind of love she wanted to experience. Faith smiled to herself, feeling a sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. She knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in her life, a chapter filled with possibility and promise. And as she drove off into the sunset, Faith knew that she would be okay, that she would find love again, and that she would never settle for anything less than she deserved. Faith woke up the next morning feeling refreshed and renewed. She knew she had made the right decision by ending things with David. She got out of bed and began to plan her new life. She booked a trip to Europe, somewhere she had always wanted to go. She enrolled in a cooking class, something she had always wanted to try. And she started volunteering at a local animal shelter, something she was passionate about. As she settled into her new routine, Faith felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. She was doing things for herself, things that made her happy. And then, one day, while volunteering at the animal shelter, Faith met him. His name was Max, and he was a volunteer coordinator at the shelter. He was kind, handsome, and had a passion for animals. Faith felt a spark of attraction, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She didn't know if it was love at first sight, but she knew she wanted to get to know Max better. Faith and Max worked together at the animal shelter, bonding over their shared love of animals. They talked about their favorite breeds, their experiences with pets, and their passion for helping those in need. As they worked together, Faith found herself feeling more and more comfortable around Maximum. She loved his kind heart, his sense of humor, and his infectious smile. One day, as they were walking dogs together, Max turned to Faith and asked, "Would you like to grab coffee with me after our shift?" Faith's heart skipped a beat. Was this a date? She didn't know, but she knew she wanted to spend more time with Max. "Sure," she said, trying to sound casual. "I'd love to." As they sipped their coffee, Faith felt a connection with Max that she hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. It was like they had known each other for years, not just minutes. And then, as they were finishing up, Max reached out and took Faith's hand. I've really enjoyed getting to know you, Faith, he said, looking into her eyes. Would you like to go out on a proper date with me? Faith's heart soared. She knew exactly what she wanted. Faith nodded eagerly, and Max smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Great, he said. I'll pick you up at 7 p.m. on Friday. Faith agreed, and they made plans for a dinner date at a cozy Italian restaurant in the city. On Friday evening, Max arrived at Faith's doorstep, bearing a bouquet of flowers and a charming smile. Faith felt like a princess as he escorted her to his car and drove her to the restaurant. Over a delicious meal of pasta and wine, they talked and laughed, sharing stories and getting to know each other better. As the evening drew to a close, Max walked Faith home, his arm around her shoulders. They stood outside her apartment, lingering in the warm summer air. I had a wonderful time tonight, Max said, looking down at Faith with affection. Faith smiled up at him, her heart full. I did too, she said. And then, without another word, Max leaned down and kissed her, his lips soft and gentle on hers. Faith felt a rush of happiness, knowing that she had found someone special. As the days turned into weeks, Faith and Max's relationship blossomed. They spent every spare moment together, exploring the city, trying new restaurants, and laughing until their sides hurt. Faith felt like she had finally found her soulmate, someone who loved her for who she was, flaws and all. One evening, as they sat on a bench watching the sunset, Max turned to Faith and said, I love you. Faith's heart skipped a beat. I love you too, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Max smiled, his eyes shining with happiness. I'm so glad we met, he said. Faith nodded, feeling grateful for that chance encounter at the animal shelter. Me too, she said. As they hugged, Faith knew that she had finally found her happily ever after. A year later, Faith and Max stood together, hand in hand, looking out at the beautiful garden of their new home. They had built a life together, filled with love, laughter, and adventure. Faith thought back to the day she had almost married David, and she shuddered at the thought of what could have been. But then she looked at Max, and her heart swelled with gratitude. I'm so glad I didn't marry him, she said, turning to Max with a smile. Max raised an eyebrow. Me too, he said, pulling her close. I don't know what I would have done if you had. Faith leaned into his embrace, feeling happy and content. You never have to find out, she said. And as they hugged, Faith knew that she had finally found her true love, her soulmate, and everything.
I hope you enjoyed the tale. If so, please like the video, comment, share it with your family and friends, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for more enchanting tales like this one. Goodbye.